33 years ago, in January of 1990, The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan was released. This is the first book in the Wheel of Time and the first of 14. And 23 years later, the 14th and final book was released, and it wasn't even by Robert Jordan, because unfortunately Robert Jordan, by the time this series ended, had passed away. It had to be finished by none other than Brandon Sanderson, Brando Sando as some like to call him. This series I started reading in about 1993, and there were 2 or 3 books out. The first couple of books were out in the first year, and I've been reading it ever since. A decade after the final book, roughly, was published, and 30 years after this was published, it came to live action on Amazon Prime. And with season 2 about to start, I wanted to talk about what I saw were positives and flaws, and there were a lot of flaws in season 1, and I wanted to talk about those because this coming Friday on September 1st, season 2 drops on Amazon Prime. Now, as a longtime fan of these books, I've read through these books, all 14, multiple times. So I am a genuine fan of this series, and it is probably one of the biggest and best-selling series of all time in the fantasy genre. Now, I understand that adapting books that are this big for an 8-episode season, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later, would be difficult, and there would have to be some things excluded and some things tweaked and rewritten. And I'll say that as a caveat, and also, this first season was under production during a worldwide pandemic, and that had to be a monumental task to even achieve putting out the first season. So I understand, again, a caveat for that. Also, they lost one of the main characters, the main actors, for unknown reasons. Plenty of speculation as to why that actor was no longer there at the end of season 1 and had to be recast for the upcoming season, but nobody knows for sure, that I've heard, why that actor is no longer with Wheel of Time. So I'm going to cut them some slack a little bit when it comes to putting this out and some of the flaws that I saw in the first season. That said, there were a lot of choices made with the writing and how they did things that frustrated me as a longtime fan of the story that I want to talk about a little bit today. The first season was a little bit of a mess for me. I found that they changed things that didn't need to be changed. They added in things that didn't need to be added in. And overall, the pace and the production of the story just seemed really, really rushed for me. It started right out of the gate with the very first episode, Winter's Night, and the festival that was happening in the village that this whole story starts in. And now I've read that initially the production wanted to have a 2-hour premiere followed by 8 more episodes, so 10 episodes in total, but Amazon only gave them 8. So I don't know how factual that is, but that would have benefited the very first episode greatly, because I didn't find that there was enough time to flesh out why these 5 young individuals had to go with Moraine and Lan, and what was going on. And it all felt a bit rushed. And I think that a 2-hour premiere of that part of the story would have benefited this whole start massively. One of the things that bothered me right from the start was the fridging of Perrin. The character Perrin was never married in the books. He never needed to have this backstory. And I will warn people, there's going to be spoilers in this video if you haven't seen season 1 or you haven't read the books. So I'll warn you of that right now because I don't want to spoil this for anyone, but there are going to be things that I will mention about the story that, if you don't know it, may expose some things for you. So the first thing was Perrin was never married in this book. He was not married. They fridged him in the sense that they made him married. His wife died or was killed by the Trolloc and Madral attack that happened on the village, and this didn't happen. So that right from the get-go annoyed me, because one of the reasons why Perrin is so afraid of hurting people is because he was always the big kid. He was always the blacksmith's apprentice, so he was stronger than everybody else. He was faster than everybody else. He was bigger than everybody else, and he was scared of hurting someone because he's a gentle giant. He didn't want to hurt anyone, and that was the whole point behind his hesitation of getting into fights or anything like that throughout the story, because he didn't want to hurt somebody at the beginning anyway. The wife and the wife's death and all of that was completely unnecessary, and that could have been built up through character development, even a little hint of him getting angry at the beginning or something. It could have been written so much better, and that annoyed me right from the get-go. So I mean, for some that may seem like a small thing, but it set the tone moving forward. Speaking of the five, Perrin, Rand, Mat, Egwene, and Nynaeve. The whole point of the first episode was that they had to leave. They had to go with Rand and Moiraine, and because one of them was the dragon reborn. Well, no, because Nynaeve and Egwene cannot be the dragon reborn. I'm all for inclusivity, and I get it, but the whole point behind this story is the male side of the One Power drives the dragon reborn insane because it's tainted. So it can only happen to a man. So them writing into the story that the dragon reborn could be, and I'm not making this up because they alluded to it, and they said one of you five could be the dragon reborn. Well, no, only one of the three of them could be the dragon reborn, not Nynaeve or Egwene. And they mentioned this throughout the first season, and that drove me absolutely crazy, because the whole premise of the story means that they can't be. So that really needs to be reworked in the second season. I mean, that's putting the cart before the horse, because it's already out there. They shouldn't have done that. There was no need of it. There's plenty of strong, powerful female characters in this book that are on par with the Dragon Reborn. So they didn't need to make the potential of Nynaeve and Egwene being the Dragon Reborn. It was just completely unnecessary, and I didn't like that at all. Let's go back to Perrin for a minute. Speaking of Perrin, how do you, in season 1, not have Elias in the story? I don't understand that. Elias is a pivotal character throughout the 14 books in Perrin's arc, his story, his whole character. There's a scene in this book where Egwene and Perrin get separated from the rest of the gang, and that actually happened in season 1. But for some reason, they didn't have him and Egwene interact with Elias. For some reason, I hope they're not trying to write out that character, because that character is pivotal for him. And so they could have had a 10-minute scene where in the book, Egwene and Perrin are stumbling through the forest, and they stumble across this man who is sitting around with what appear to be dogs, but they're actually wolves, around a fire in the forest, and they join him at the fire, and there's some little indication of, the wolves are talking to this guy, but they can't hear anything. This could have happened. This easily could have happened. It could have been a 10-minute scene, but instead they had Egwene and Perrin run around a field for 5 minutes being chased by wolves. It made no sense when you could have introduced another character and a pivotal character in Perrin's arc and had him continue on throughout season 2. That was a missed opportunity. Not having Elias in the story, if they choose to write that character out, is going to drive me insane. Hopefully they don't do that. One of the most frustrating parts of season 1 for me was the whole Steppen episode. Probably 90% of that entire episode was a complete and utter waste of time, as far as I'm concerned. If it was being used to show the bond between the warder and the Aes Sedai, then there were better ways to do that through character development. You didn't need to show that for an entire episode. It didn't need to happen. You could have used that time that was wasted on that episode and, like I said, had a second episode to premiere, expanded the character with Perrin and have Elias in there. It was just a wasted opportunity. That episode was utterly pointless. It wasn't necessary, and it drove me crazy that they wasted almost an entire episode of an 8-episode season on that episode. One of the things that I think they absolutely nailed were the White Cloaks. The White Cloaks were perfect, and dude playing the Inquisitor is creepy as F. He's just creepy, man. He's perfect. They nailed those, and I really appreciated the fact that they nailed those because I was worried about that. I think that they can expand them a little bit more, but the Inquisitor, he's fantastic. So that character was absolutely nailed. And like I want to emphasize, I have no problem with any of the actors, any of the acting. The acting was stupendous for the material they were given. They really performed really well. The acting, hands down, bravo. Another thing that drove me really crazy near the end of the season 1, Lan and Nynaeve's romance took about 7 books to actually materialize. You don't need to generate a romance in a story for the sake of having a romance. It didn't develop that fast. She couldn't stand him, and over time they became closer and closer and more interweaved in the character development, and they realized how much they needed each other, and it probably, if they're going to have 6 or 7 seasons of this show, which I think reportedly, I think it's 8 maybe, they could have stretched this out for probably 4 seasons or more of them snip at each other. And, being irritated by his stoicism, and again, missed opportunity. I don't know why they generated that romance so fast. And speaking of romance, or simulated romance, the whole Perrin, Egwene, Rand love triangle thing, get the hell out of here. That didn't happen at all. Perrin was not interested in Egwene in any way, shape, or form. She was like a sister to him, and this whole insinuation that there was some kind of connection in that romantically between the two of them, get out of here. That never happened, and it shouldn't have been in season 1. It shouldn't have been even insinuated, even a little bit. That drove me crazy. Now, there's little things that I kept commenting on throughout that drove me crazy. Like every time they came to a waygate, the waygates were horrible. And they made no sense because they were supposed to be these ancient things that were built into the side of hillsides. And you've got a waygate and this big freaking thing out in the middle of a field standing there, and there's no Aventosora leaf that has to be removed to open the gate. And that was the whole point of having Loyal there, was for him to open the gates. And so they literally eliminated the need for having him there, why Moraine needed him, by not having that function. It didn't make any sense. The waygates were hideous. Now the ways were good. I liked the ways. The ways were kind of what I envisioned in my brain when I was reading the story. They kind of got that. The waygates, though, I was really disappointed with those. It looked like they took something out of Stargate and plunked it in the middle of a field. Like, what were you doing? That was horrible. I hope that they tweak that a little bit in the coming seasons, but I don't expect that they will. Speaking of Loyal, his character frustrated me a little bit, because when you look at Loyal in the books, that's him. You know, in the old styled original cover art, that's Loyal right there, with the big ears and the more manly looking, like it just, the actor, perfect. His voice, fantastic. The costume, meh. And the look was all wrong to me anyway. And from what I've read, a lot of people didn't see Loyal when they looked at that character. For those that haven't read the books, it was probably fine, but for those that have, Loyal has pointy ears that twitch, and he's got big puffy eyebrows that that are very expressive, and this character just didn't seem to fit that description. So that was a little bit frustrating. But the actor, the movements, and the sound of his voice and his slow plodding, like, that was perfect. He did that very, very well. And the size and everything was really good. Just the costuming and the look was bothersome for me. I know it sounds like I'm crapping all over this season. I did enjoy it to a point. Now, one of the other things that drove me crazy was, when did Tom's cloak turn into Tom's jacket lining? Like, writers, what were you thinking? I don't get it. And why was Tom such an a-hole? Like, he was a jerk, and he wasn't in the books. Not like this guy played him. Nothing against the actor, because he did it well, but the direction that they took the character was really weird. The whole town they were in was weird. Rand is supposed to take the cloak at some point and go off and use it to perform in inns so that he can survive. Matt's supposed to be with him. Like, this whole thing was really weird. That whole episode was me sitting there going, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. Where's his cloak? Why is he not performing in his cloak? So that whole thing was really weird for me, because that wasn't the Tom that I envisioned, especially when he was performing. Normally when he performs, he takes that cloak, and the multicolored patches all over it signify that he is that performer. So that was weird for me. Rand and Moraine running off into the Blight by themselves didn't happen. Was weird. The CGI in that episode was rough. And that wasn't even the worst CGI in the whole thing. But I'm just checking some notes here. Hands down, the best episode was number 7 with the Aiel battle and Tam discovering the wounded pregnant Aiel, and that whole scene was like, if the whole show was on that level, no, I'm not talking about battles or things like that, but if the production level was that high as it was in that scene, amazing. That whole scene with the Aiel battle at the beginning, and Tam, and the pregnant Aiel dying, and the other warriors, etc. That had me on the edge of my seat. That was perfect. They nailed that. That was so good, and explained Tam and Rand's backstory to a certain degree excellently. Like, it was just really good. But then they followed it up with episode 8. Episode 8, as the season finale, was very much a letdown. This was the episode that really left me with a sour taste in my mouth at the end of episode 8, because there were some things that just didn't jive for me. Like Egwene healing Nynaeve with no training whatsoever, healing her pretty much from death, which is impossible. The one power cannot heal death, and Nynaeve looked pretty dead to me, which also didn't happen. So I don't understand if they didn't understand the source material, if they were rushing it. I don't get it. That whole linking thing, if memory serves, didn't happen at all. The battle happened, but the CGI in that whole battle scene was horrendous. Like, if you had to wait a few more months to put the season out in order to get that right, wait so that you get it right, because that was pretty bad. Now, again, caveat, during COVID, etc., etc. If you go back to an episode where they were at Shadar Logoth, the visuals of that were really good. It was way too short, like 15 minutes of an episode, and they were there and they were out. Like, I understand time constraints and editing for time, but again, that was a big part of what's going to affect the storyline down the way. Episode 8, just the whole interaction between Padden Fane and Perrin at the end. I know that was a bit of a rewrite because of COVID and Barney leaving, the Matt character actor leaving. So it was supposed to be Matt. So there was some interactions there that were not the way they were supposed to be. That drove me a little crazy, but I caught them a little bit of slack with that. But the episode 8 was rough. It was not the way, like episode 7 was so good. Episode 8 just kind of went, "Rrr." And what the actual Moraine being cut off from the One Power didn't happen. It just didn't happen. Like, why would you do that? It makes no sense, and it didn't happen. So why would you write that in there? They're using some plot devices that don't make any sense to me. It's not part of the story, and it's completely unnecessary. So hopefully in season 2 they'll explain that. And don't get me wrong, I'm very much looking forward to season 2 on September 1st. I'm very excited to see where they go. I mean, we're going to get the Shan Chan, which in some of the trailers are visually totally not what I expected. The whole the fingernails being like 3 feet long. I don't understand that. I don't know how they function. When I read the books multiple times, I envisioned, extra long nails that they would still be able to function. These things are feet long, so I don't get it. The whole of season 1, it just seemed rushed. Like I said at the beginning of this video, 2 more episodes and we could have slowed down the pace just a little bit and expanded things that needed to be expanded. Get rid of things that aren't necessary, didn't need to be there at all. One of the biggest things that drove me crazy about the whole season was it was too clean. And what I mean by that, it was too CW versus clean versus HBO dirty. So, like, for example, you have a character that's just ridden 100 miles on a horse on a dusty dirt road, but his outfit is spotless. Completely clean, not a fleck of dirt, nothing. Costumers, take those costumes out and drag them around in the dirt a little bit. I'm sure you have more than one. I hope you have more than one. But, it just, that drove me a bit crazy. All the sets were a little bit too clean. You've got a rundown tavern that looked brand new. Sure, it was probably brand new, but stress it out a little bit. It's just little production value things like that were very visible to me for some reason. Overall, I would give season 1 somewhere, 5.5, 6 out of 10. It wasn't bad, but it could have been way better. Way, way better. With just some minor and some major tweaks, like cutting out an entire episode, Steppen. And I'm very much looking forward to book 2. Apparently, season 2, I should say, is supposedly following book 2, which is The Great Hunt. So we're only into book 2. Maybe they're going to go into book 3. Because they zipped through this really quickly, and I suspect they're going to do the same thing with this one. There's a lot going on in this book. So some of the trailers confuse me a little bit, but trailers lie. Like Perrin with what appears to be Avienda in season 2, that didn't happen. So some of these rewrites are frustrating for me as a fan of the books. We're still only getting 8 episodes in season 2. The trailers are interesting, but again, like I said, trailers lie. I'm very hopeful for a much more fruitful season 2 because they didn't have to deal with the pandemic as much. I'm very curious to see the new actor picking up the mantle of Matt and see how that goes. We do see that we are getting Elaine in this season. We are getting some other characters that I think we're getting Varen, and we are getting Celine. So it's going to be interesting how this all plays out. And like I said, we're going to get the Shan Chan. So and I want to see if they make them as badass and evil as they come across in the books. I'm really hopeful that they really amp that up and make them like this evil force that is really a threat to the whole continent. And if they pull back on that, that's going to be unfortunate because they're terrifying. They're absolutely terrifying. And when some of the female characters get captured, they are really put through the ringer. And I hope that they really show that how much, particularly with Egwene, how much that affects her mental capacity throughout the rest of the series. I hope they emphasize that. But I don't want to go on too much more because this is getting long and there's going to be lots to talk about with this series and season 2. So If you haven't watched season 1, check it out. It's not perfect, but some of it is really good, some of it isn't. Hopefully season 2 is better. I look forward to it, and we'll talk about it again, and I'll see you again next time.